She laughed. Not the kind of laugh you share with friends, not the kind that warms the room, but the kind that cuts deep. The kind that makes you question if you'll ever be good enough. I still remember the sound of it, sharp, mocking, echoing in my head long after the moment was over. And the worst part? I wasn't even trying to impress her. I just wanted to try, to step out of my comfort zone, to take a chance on myself for once. But the second I stumbled, the second I showed a crack in my armor, she pounced on it like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. That night, I lay awake replaying it all. The way her eyes narrowed, the smirk she couldn't hide, the way her friends laughed along, not because they found it funny, but because they didn't want to be the odd one out. It was humiliating. I wanted to disappear. But here's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes the people who laugh the loudest are the ones closest to you. They see your failures, and instead of lifting you up, they use them as fuel. For her, my struggles were entertainment. Every mistake I made was another punchline in her private comedy show. And yet, as much as her laughter crushed me, I couldn't stop noticing something else. In the corner of the room, just a step behind her, someone else was watching. Her sister. She didn't laugh. She didn't mock me. She didn't roll her eyes. She just stood there, almost as if she saw something different. Something no one else cared to notice. It was the smallest thing, a look, a nod, the faintest smile. But in that moment, it felt like oxygen in a room where I was drowning. Like maybe, just maybe, my failures weren't the end of the story. Still, the damage was done. I carried that humiliation with me, day after day. Every time I thought about trying again, I heard her voice in my head. That laugh, that sneer, that crushing reminder that in her eyes, I was nothing more than a joke. And when you start to believe that, it gets dangerous. You start holding yourself back before anyone else can. You stop raising your hand. You stop speaking up. You stop dreaming. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. Because the same person who once stood quietly in the background would later step into the spotlight in my life in a way I never could have predicted. She didn't laugh at me. She didn't mock me. She celebrated me. She cheered for me when no one else did. And that changed everything. But back then, in that moment, I had no idea. All I could hear was her sister's laughter ringing in my ears, making me believe I'd never escape it. At least, not until something happened that turned the story upside down. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand the people in this story. Because this wasn't just about one bad laugh or one embarrassing moment. It was about years of little things that built up until I almost broke. Her name was Claire. On the surface, she was the kind of person people admired. Confident, outspoken, quick with a joke. She had this way of walking into a room and making everyone notice her, like she owned the place without even trying. People liked her, or at least pretended to, because she had that charm, that edge. But beneath all of that, there was something sharper, something colder. With me, she always seemed to notice the wrong things. The way my voice cracked when I got nervous. The way I stumbled over words when I wasn't prepared. If I made a mistake, she never let me forget it. Sometimes she didn't even have to say anything. Just a smirk across the room was enough to make my chest tighten. And then there was her sister, Emma. The complete opposite. Quiet, thoughtful, almost shy. She didn't fight for attention, didn't care about being the loudest voice in the room. She observed more than she spoke. And unlike Claire, she didn't seem to see me as a target. If anything, she looked at me as though she understood something no one else did. The three of us weren't strangers. We grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools, crossed paths at the same family gatherings because our parents were friends. I'd known them for years, but the way they treated me couldn't have been more different. With Claire, it always felt like I was one step away from being humiliated. With Emma, it felt like I didn't have to pretend. But back then, none of that seemed to matter. What mattered was the weight of failure. I wasn't the star student, the athlete, or the popular kid. I was the one who tried, stumbled, and got laughed at for it. And Claire made sure I never forgot. It wasn't just her laugh that hurt, it was the way it followed me. The way her friends would whisper when I walked by. The way even people who didn't know the full story still treated me like I was the punchline of some inside joke. I wanted to fight back, to stand tall, but I didn't know how. And through all of it, Emma stayed in the background. Never joining in, never defending me outright either. Just watching. Sometimes I wondered what she thought when her sister laughed at me. Did she agree? Did she secretly pity me? Or was there something else in her silence that I wasn't able to see at the time? The truth is, I didn't know. All I knew was that every day felt like another test I was bound to fail. And the more I failed, the louder Claire laughed. But then, something happened that forced me back into the spotlight again. This time, in front of everyone. And Claire was ready, waiting to tear me apart. It started with something small, like most disasters do. Our teacher announced that everyone in class would have to present a project in front of the entire school assembly. Not just a group of friends, not just the class, the whole school. My stomach dropped the second I heard it. For most people, it was just another assignment. But for me, it felt like a setup for failure. Speaking in front of a crowd was already my worst nightmare. Add Claire into the mix, sitting there with her smug little grin, waiting for me to stumble. It was a recipe for disaster. The weeks leading up to that presentation were torture. I practiced over and over, talking to my reflection, whispering lines under my breath on the bus, trying to memorize every single word so I wouldn't freeze. But no matter how hard I tried, the same fear crept in. What if I fail again? What if she laughs louder this time? And she knew it too. Every time I passed her in the hallway, she'd smirk and say things like, "Better not choke up there." Or, "Don't worry, maybe they'll clap out of pity." Her words were poison, sinking deeper each day. But there was Emma. Quiet, steady Emma. One afternoon, when she found me sitting alone in the library rehearsing, she didn't laugh. She didn't tease. She just said, "You're better than you think." Simple words, almost too simple, but they hit differently. For the first time, I wondered if maybe she saw something I didn't. Still, when the day finally came, all of that encouragement vanished the second I stepped on stage. Hundreds of eyes staring at me, waiting. My hands trembled. My throat went dry. And then, from the front row, I saw her. Claire. Arms crossed, lips curled into that mocking smile, like she was already preparing to enjoy the show. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The silence stretched. People started whispering. Heat crawled up my neck. My vision blurred. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I heard it. The softest chuckle from Claire, loud enough for me to catch, sharp enough to slice me open. I was about to break, right there on stage. And then, something happened that no one expected. The silence in that auditorium felt like it could swallow me whole. My heart pounded so hard I swore everyone could hear it. My mouth moved, but no sound came out. My notes trembled in my sweaty hands, the words blurring together like a cruel joke. And then came that laugh again, Claire's laugh. Sharp, deliberate, carrying across the rows like she wanted everyone to know she had won. A few people chuckled under their breath, not because my failure was funny, but because her reaction made it feel okay to laugh at me. I wanted to run, to throw down my papers, rush off stage, and never come back. The shame burned through me, and all I could think was, this is it. This is the moment they'll remember forever. But then, just as I was about to crumble, my eyes caught hers. Emma. She was sitting a few rows back, her posture straight, her gaze locked on me. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't even pitying me. She just looked at me with this steady calm, as if silently saying, "Don't give up now." It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me take a shaky breath. My voice finally pushed through, cracked and uneven. But there, a few heads turned. A few whispers died down. I kept going, one line after another, forcing the words out even though my hands were trembling. But Claire wasn't finished. Every time I stumbled on a word, I saw her smirk widen. Every time I paused too long, she leaned over to whisper something to the person beside her, who immediately snickered. It was like she was orchestrating my downfall, feeding on every ounce of my fear. Still, I pushed forward. My voice grew louder, stronger. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could pull this off. But right when I started to believe in myself, disaster struck. My mind went blank. A complete blackout. The next line, the one I had practiced 100 times, just disappeared. The auditorium fell silent again. My chest tightened. My vision swam. I could feel the panic crawling up my throat, and I knew this was it. This was the moment Claire was waiting for. And sure enough, from the front row, she burst into laughter. Not a quiet chuckle this time, but full-blown laughter. Loud, mocking, impossible to ignore. The audience rippled with awkward giggles, unsure whether to join in or stay quiet. My face burned. My body froze. I wanted to sink into the floor, to vanish, to never be seen again. But then, something happened. A sound cut through the laughter. A voice, clear, unexpected and louder than hers. And when I realized who it came from, my entire world tilted. The voice that broke through the laughter didn't just silence the room. It shook me to my core. Enough, Claire. Every head turned. It was Emma. Her voice, usually so soft it barely carried across a classroom, now thundered through the auditorium. For the first time, Claire's grin faltered. The room froze. No one ever called Claire out. Not teachers, not friends, not even family. But Emma did. And she didn't stop there. You think this is funny? Watching someone try, watching them fight through their fear while you sit there and tear them down? Maybe you should be up here instead. Let's see if you can do better. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire's face went pale, then red, then pale again. She opened her mouth to fire back, but the words stuck in her throat. For once, she wasn't the one in control. I stood there stunned. The girl who had always stayed in the background had just turned the entire spotlight on herself and on me. But then, something even more unexpected happened. The audience began to shift. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching, waiting. And that's when everything changed. The silence after Emma's outburst was deafening. All eyes shifted from her to me, and for the first time, Claire's laughter wasn't the loudest thing in the room. It was her silence. My hand still shook, but something inside me shifted. Emma had given me a crack of light in the darkness, and suddenly, I didn't care about Claire's smirk anymore. I cared about proving to myself that I wasn't the joke she wanted me to be. I took a breath, so deep it felt like my lungs would burst. And then, the words came. Not perfect, not smooth, but real. Stronger with every line. My voice steadied. My story poured out. The audience leaned in, not because they were waiting for me to fail, but because they wanted to hear what I had to say. Claire sat frozen, her smile fading as the applause grew. By the time I finished, the auditorium erupted. People were clapping, cheering, even standing. For once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the punchline. I was seen. And right in the middle of it all, Emma stood, clapping louder than anyone. Our eyes met, and I felt something shift that went far deeper than just gratitude. But then came the twist. As the cheers died down, Claire stood up too. Not clapping, not smiling. Her face was stone. She looked straight at Emma, then at me, and said, "So that's how it is, huh? You're taking his side now." The room fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't about me forgetting my words or stumbling over lines. It was about something bigger, something between the sisters, something I had just unknowingly stepped right into the middle of. Because this wasn't only about my failure or my success anymore. It was about loyalty, about a bond between them that I had just cracked wide open. And the look in Claire's eyes told me one thing. This story wasn't over. Not even close. The days after the assembly felt strangely different. People who used to walk past me without a glance suddenly stopped to say, "Hey, good job up there." Teachers smiled at me in the hall. Even classmates I barely knew nodded in respect. It wasn't fame, it wasn't glory, it was something quieter, but deeper. For once, I wasn't defined by failure. But the bigger shift wasn't in the crowd. It was in me. Standing on that stage, facing my worst fear and pushing through it, showed me something I'd been blind to all along. I was never as weak as Claire made me feel. Her laughter had power only because I gave it to her. Once I stopped letting it define me, it lost its hold. And Emma, she changed everything. That moment she stood up for me. She did more than silence her sister. She reminded me that kindness can be louder than cruelty if you let it. She didn't just cheer for me that day. She believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. That's something you never forget. As for Claire, things between her and Emma shifted. You could feel it in the air whenever they were in the same room. Claire had always been the dominant one, the voice that filled every space. But after that assembly, she couldn't laugh at me the same way anymore. She knew people had seen her for what she was, and it stung. Did she change overnight? No, people rarely do. She still had her smirks, her sharp comments, her need to be in control. But there was hesitation now, a crack in the armor. Maybe Emma standing up to her had planted a seed. Maybe not. Either way, her voice didn't echo in my head anymore. What I carried with me wasn't the sound of her laughter, but the sound of applause. The memory of Emma's steady gaze. The realization that even when the world feels like it's against you, one voice, one person, can tilt the balance. Life didn't magically become easy after that. I still stumbled. I still doubted myself sometimes. But I also remembered that day, and the way I kept going even when everything inside me screamed to quit. That memory became my anchor. And Emma? She became more than just Claire's quiet sister. Over time, she became my friend. Someone I could talk to without fear of being mocked. Someone who celebrated not just my successes, but my attempts. And isn't that what we all need? Someone who sees us not for our failures, not for our flaws, but for our effort, our heart, and our growth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: people will laugh. People will doubt. People will try to define you by your mistakes. But in the end, their laughter isn't what matters. What matters is the voice that says, keep going. You're better than you think. And sometimes, that voice doesn't come from within. Sometimes, it comes from someone who refuses to laugh when everyone else does. Someone who chooses to celebrate you instead. That's the voice worth listening to. That's the one that can change everything.